Is it tough love or is it bullying? We're going to talk about coaching in the NHL today with our special guest, Tom Laidlaw, and this is the hockeydebates.com podcast. Welcome, everyone. I'm Bob Duff, as always, joined by my Hall of Fame co-host, Kevin Allen. And Kevin, why don't you introduce today's guest?
Well, as Bob mentioned, our guest is Tom Laidlaw. Of course, who played 11 seasons in the NHL for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. And I like to kid him about the fact that he was on the power play with Wayne Gretzky when he was in LA. Yeah, and I actually witnessed that. I was watching, I don't remember it live when I covered him, but I was watching an ESPN Classic game, and it was the middle of the night, and all of a sudden I'm watching, and Gretzky stayed out for both shifts on the power play, and here comes my friend Tom Laidlaw off the bench to be on that power play. I actually called him while it was going on, saying, "You're never going to believe this, but I'm watching you on the power play with Gretzky." So, and
apropos, we're talking about coaching. That's excellent coaching right there. Get me out there in the power play.
Well, and as I always mentioned to Tom, Gretzky passed the puck back to him on the point, and he gave it back to Wayne. So
quickly,
if Wayne was watching in his house, he said, "Look at this, Janet. Look at this guy I got to play with."
Exactly. What a thrill that was for, right?
Yeah. Anyway, Tom, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is I wanted to talk a little bit about relationship between coaches and players. And, we had the build up to the trade for Pierre-Luc Dubois. And it turned out actually good for all parties. I think everybody was pretty happy. Dubois was happy to get out of Columbus. And even though there was talk that he wanted to be in a bigger market, he seems happy where he is, at least for now. Patrick Laine saying all the right things about being in Columbus. Winnipeg has a center, which they desperately needed. Columbus adds not only one scorer, but Roslovic, who they think they can squeak, maybe 15 goals this season out of him. Maybe that's too much, but so everybody's happy about it. But what is sort of leaked out in the last, I would say, 36 hours or so is the story about, what happened. And, if the reporting is accurate, and I'm assuming that it is, basically Dubois and Jarmo Kekalainen reached an agreement over, the fact that Dubois wanted to go elsewhere. And the agreement is that he would give them 2-year deal, 2 years to work this out. And, they wouldn't let on what was going on so he could just play in peace. Now, so that's the story. And obviously, that's not the way it worked out. And, John Tortorella, who, if anything, he's honest to a fault. And he sort of, revealed to the world that Dubois wanted out. And of course, then Dubois had to address it with his teammates, and the thing got a lot messier. So my question to you to start this conversation is, when you make an agreement, should Dubois have known this was going to get out? You can't make an agreement with management and coaches, or was there a violation by the Blue Jackets of a trust between a player and the team?
Wow, great question. First of all, I didn't know about the agreement that Kekalainen and the player had made about not saying anything. I went through it as an agent where I had Brian Berard, who was drafted first overall by the Ottawa Senators. And at that time, Ottawa was quite a mess. And we had told him privately that, listen, he's not going to play there. We weren't trying to be mean. We weren't trying to disparage the organization like that. We just said, listen, it's a mess right now. We feel like he should be someplace else. And they made it public then too, and I felt made it even messier. And then it made it worse for them too. So John Tortorella is unique. If I'm the general manager and he did that without my knowledge, I wouldn't be too happy about it, because it's really not, to my mind, it's not Tortorella that had made the agreement. It was Kekalainen, the general manager, that made the agreement. So, but it made him look really bad, right? That now Tortorella is going out there and saying publicly that he wants to get traded. And, the player, to me, he didn't seem to be the John Tortorella kind of guy that was blocking shots and playing the physical game and everything. But for the most part, I thought he was playing pretty hard. But then, and from what I understand, he had told his teammates that, yes, I have asked to get traded, but I'm going to come and play hard every game and do what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, in the game that he got benched, he didn't do that. And apparently, from what I understand, the players, put it delicately, approached him and let him know, listen, they didn't appreciate what he was doing. So, I mean, to me, there's a lot of blame to go around on how this is handled. It's a young player. I don't think he handled it well, even though Tortorella came out and said what he said. To me, as a player, you still want to go play. You don't want to become known as a guy that doesn't play for your teammates, no matter what has happened. There's lots of stuff that goes on behind the scenes all the time in the National Hockey League. We never find out about it, but players go and play. So do I like the fact that Tortorella did it? But you've got John Tortorella as your coach. You know what he's going to do. There's no doubting the fact that he is going to tell the truth, and he is hard on his players. He tries to get the most out of them. So although I don't like what he did, I don't like what the player did even less. Right, like he should have competed as hard as he could for his own good and for his teammates.
Well, could this go ahead, Bob?
No, I was going to say it's kind of a two-way street because, as you say, I mean, you know what John Tortorella is as a coach. It's not a surprise to a player at this stage of the NHL to know he's not a newbie. He's been around for almost 20 years as an NHL coach. People know what he's about. But he also knew what the player was about, and is there kind of have to be give and take on both sides in that scenario? I mean, maybe Dubois had to do some things that he doesn't really enjoy doing, but Tortorella had to accept this guy's got the talent to win us games, and maybe I have to realize, having him diving in front of shots isn't in the best interest of the team.
Well, ideally, you're right, Bob. But John Tortorella he's a brand. He is the John Tortorella brand. The John Tortorella brand is one way. You play the way I tell you to play, or you don't play here. If you don't want to play here, that's fine. But you're going to play hard. You're going to block shots. You're going to be committed to the defensive style of play. And he gets a lot out of his guys. I know it's hard, but Herb Brooks was the same way. I talk all the time. Kevin and I talk about it, where I love him now for what he did for me and how he pushed me to, not just as a hockey player, but as a person, become better and better, get the most out of yourself all the time. But I didn't love him when he was coaching me. In fact, sometimes I hated him, some of the stuff he would say. And John Tortorella is certainly that way. So, Bob, you're right. Ideally, you would say, John, you got to change your ways a little bit. But Tortorella, if he changes his ways, then he's not John Tortorella, right? I mean, if he says, okay, I'm going to let Pierre-Luc Dubois get different treatment, then what do the rest of the guys in the team say? Well, no, that's not the way he coaches. This is the way you're going to understand. This is the way it is if you're going to play for John Tortorella.
Well, here's my wonder as well. Like, first of all, we don't really know. Maybe Dubois felt like they had an agreement that this wasn't going to come out, but maybe that wasn't the way Carolina understood it. And honestly, a GM and a coach are going to talk. If they're not talking, then that's a far different problem, for the team, if there's no communication between the coach and general manager. But, I think you hit the nail on the head, Bob, when you said it's not like people don't know what Tortorella is all about. And, I've never taken a poll, but I would guess, because I've had players tell me they've enjoyed their Tortorella experience. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't yelled at or, that he didn't tick them off at some point in time. But overall, I think they like the fact that, with the exception of maybe in Vancouver, wherever he's been, he's got the best out of his team. Like that Ranger team that he had always overachieved, in my opinion. I didn't think they were as good as he had them playing. And he won a cup with Tampa Bay, and this Columbus team, Bob, you and I raved about how they were playing last season, and we thought it was like he's the perfect, coach for them. So I guess my next question, Tom, is like, even though there was some hints that he wanted to go to a bigger market, I wonder what percentage it is really about Tortorella. They had the confrontation on the bench. Maybe that it just wasn't a good marriage. Your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, if he's smart, he's again, no disrespect to the city of Winnipeg, but I do believe part of it was going to a different market, right? I don't think he would have picked Winnipeg as a place to go, but he can't now come out, if he's smart anyways, and he appears to be smart now, come out and say bad things about Winnipeg. He just left the place he didn't want to be. Now he's going to immediately badmouth another place he's gone to. So I don't know if it's totally for certain that he's really wants to be in Winnipeg, but we'll see. But there's no question to me, a player like Dubois probably didn't want to play for Tortorella, right? I mean, I was in LA when Robbie Ftorek was coaching. I love Robbie Ftorek. I played with him as a teammate, totally disciplined, same way as a coach. There was a way that he coached. He was like Brooks. He was like Tortorella. There's a way he was going to coach, and that was going to be it. Everybody was going to get coached the same way. But Wayne Gretzky's on the team. You can't treat Wayne Gretzky like everybody else. It's just, I think everybody in hockey understands that. And it's not like he's getting preferential treatment, but he has to have a longer leash to be able to do the things that he wants to do, to be able to be Wayne Gretzky. You can't coach Tom Laidlaw the same way you coach Wayne Gretzky, right? Like, I have to play a certain style, a certain way. I'll never forget when I was coaching, or when Herbie was coaching me, and we were killing penalties. Like Herbie had the saying, he said, "Laidlaw, when you get the puck, give it to somebody else. You're not supposed to have it." So we were killing penalties one time, and I must be feeling pretty good about myself. And all I had to do was shoot the puck down. I think we were in Washington, or was, I'm pretty sure it was there. All I had to do was shoot it down. I had lots of room to do it, but I felt really good about myself. A guy came towards me. I do the little toe drag, and then I shoot it down. So at the end of the day, I got the same thing done. But when I got back to the bench, Herb Brooks ripped into me like, "What are you doing?" I was not allowed to do that stuff. Now, you couldn't obviously coach Wayne Gretzky that way. Wayne Gretzky was allowed to do the things he had to do to be Wayne Gretzky. So, to me, there's no question that Dubois would rather have had somebody else as a coach than John Tortorella.
There is different ways for coaches to get their message through. I remember Dennis Potvin telling me a story about Al Arbour, Dennis's rookie season. You talk about carrying the puck out of the zone. Well, Dennis could carry the puck out of the zone in the Ontario Hockey League whenever he chose to.
Yeah.
And he decided he was going to do that right off the bat in the NHL too. So one day after practice, he said, Arbour called him over and said, "Dennis, I want you to stay out with me, and I want you to get all the pucks and put them over there in that corner." So Dennis, gathered all the pucks, put them in the corner of the rink, and he said, "Okay, Dennis, now you go stand on the goal line. And when I blow the whistle, you skate as hard as you can to the blue line." So he blew his whistle, and Dennis goes like a bat out of hell, and Al slides a puck when Dennis gets about halfway up the ice and slides a puck and it gets to the blue line first. He calls him back, tells him to do the same thing again. They do this maybe 10, 15 times. Then he calls him over and says, "Okay, Dennis, here's what we're going to do." He said, "You can keep carrying the puck out of the zone, and we can stay here and do this all day long, or you can start headmanning the puck. It's your choice."
That's pretty good. I like that. I've never heard that story there. That's pretty good. The puck moves quicker than Flair does. Yeah, that's good.
And, it's one of the greatest all-time defensemen in the NHL. So,
yeah.
Anybody can be taught a lesson. And the way he did it, Dennis said he kind of thought, he's got a point.
Yeah. That's excellent. That's good. That's very good.
Tom, despite how this sort of looked from the outside looking in for, 2 or 3 days and what was going to happen, rarely in these situations do GMs make a deal that they're happy about. Usually you don't do very well when you're trying to trade what Brian Burke always refers to as a distressed asset, when everybody knows you need to make a trade. Right. But I would say, as I mentioned earlier, that both general managers did an incredible job. So, they at least on a temporary basis solved their problems. Now, Dubois is at least tied up for 2 seasons, where Winnipeg was going to have to do battle with Laine over a contract at the end of this year. Laine is a perfect fit with regard to his scoring ability for Columbus. You think this was happenstance, or should we give them some credit for realizing that they could solve each other's problems?
Well, it's to me, it's a courageous move by both GMs. So I say we need to give them credit, right? Because, like you said, Dubois can walk at the end of the contract, and then Laine now still has to get wrapped up too. So both GMs, yes, they've solved a temporary hockey problem, and I think they've done that well. I think with the Dubois and Winnipeg now, they got a good center iceman there now with him added to the group. And Laine, like you said, they really need the goal scoring in Columbus. So from a hockey standpoint, they did a good job for the short term. But you touched on, it's a dicey move, right, for GMs. This can come back in 2 years, and both GMs could look like they've got egg on their face because they've given up these star young players that are going off someplace else and playing great. And now they're left with nothing after all that problem. But I guess they got time to fix that. But again, I do give them credit for courage. But I also get to say, well, you're right. What was our choices? Dubois was going to walk at the end of the contract. Yes, we would have had it for 2 more years. But once Torts set him on the bench, that kind of solved that problem too. So a little bit of both. I think both those general managers have done a fantastic job with their teams. I like what they're doing in general, and they did well in these deals.
Yeah, I think they both have more years of restricted at the end of the contracts, right?
But I believe no, I think Dubois basically signed. That's a bridge deal, so he's. I believe he's unrestricted at the end of the deal. I think I'd have to check on that.
Yeah, because I was thinking, he's only been.
No, you're probably right. He is a restricted free agent with arbitration rights. You're right.
Right. Yeah, the arbitration is.
Yeah. No, you're correct.
Yeah, so.
Is this kind of a no-win situation for a player, Tom? I mean, it seems like whenever there's a player team or player coach dispute, the media generally looks at it from the coach's point of view. And, the player looks like, from the outside, people view him as a malcontent. Everybody thinks you're so lucky to be in the NHL, and they don't equate it to, we've all had bosses who we didn't like working for and had to put up with it. And, why don't you just suck it up and put up with it too?
Well, it's a great question, Bob. I just think things have changed so much in general in society, particularly in sports and in the National Hockey League. Like, to me, there's differences. There's John Tortorella, who is just hard on guys because he wants to get the most out of them. Then there's the other coaches that personally I don't like that much. The Mike Babcocks, the Ken Hitchcocks, the Mike Keenans. Those are the guys. They play all these mind games with the players that are totally unnecessary. I think they do it more for their own brand as coaches to build the brand that they're these master scientists of the game of hockey. And it's stuff that's totally unnecessary. And it doesn't mean those guys I mentioned are good coaches. I'm not saying they're not good coaches, but the extra things they do, like the Mike Babcock stuff with the Mitch Marner and Franzen in Detroit, it's just totally unnecessary stuff that doesn't help the team win. It doesn't bond the team together. The only thing it does is try to make the coach look like he's smarter than. And again, I think Mike Babcock is a good hockey coach. I just think all those extra things they make it unnecessary. Like, players, in Detroit talked about all the time that he was just terrible to play for. They used some pretty crazy language for him, kind of guy he was. But you know what? Those were older guys that just wanted to win. Now, not everybody is made that way. It doesn't mean that they're less of a man or less of a hockey player because they don't want to be treated in a new inhumane way. Like the stuff that I heard about Marner that he made Marner do is just ridiculous. I don't know. There's no point in that kind of stuff. And we had coaches that did that kind of stuff. And again, it's more, to be honest with you, coaches like Scotty Bowman would do a lot of stuff too, from what I understand, but he got away with it. He had veteran teams all the time. The Larry Robinsons and the Bob Gainey's and the Guy Lafleurs would say, I don't know. I mean, like there's always the stories about Mark Messier taking the team over in '94 when the Rangers won the Cup with Mike Keenan. They basically just didn't listen to him anymore. They just listened to Mark Messier. And if you have a Mark Messier on the team, well, then you can get away with it, and everybody just rides off in the sunset winning their Stanley Cup. But they have strong leaders. But to me, it's not necessary in the game. It never was necessary in the game. I just think, again, it's something to help the coaches build their brand.
Tom, we're going to have to let you go, but before you do, just a couple of quick answers. Mike Babcock said before the NBC game that he regretted how he handled the Marner situation. Do you buy that?
No, I don't. I think that Mike Babcock's that's his brand. That is a brand that he has built to coach that way. I think he only regrets that he's now been called out on it and he's lost his job and he's been painted in a different light. Like everybody viewed him as the elite coach. He knows how to coach. And I just don't think people look at him that way anymore. Again, there's too many other good coaches out there. You and I have talked about Gerard Gallant so much. I think he's a fantastic coach, and they coach in a much different way than Mike Babcock does. Yeah,
and then finally, you and I have talked a lot about the Vancouver Canucks, and I'm trying to get my finger on why they've had such a poor start. And I just wonder what your thoughts. Is it simply goaltending, defense, all the above?
They got a young team there, right? And I remember my first year in the National Hockey League, we went to the semifinals and we ultimately lost. We had two good runs. We beat LA in the first round, St. Louis in the second, finally lost to Islanders that are going on to win their second cup at that point. So now you come back for the second year, and I'll turn, then the timing was a little bit different. Herb Brooks was coming in, and I thought I was this veteran hockey player now that was done so great. I came into camp about 20 pounds overweight, and I learned pretty quickly that was not the way to conduct yourself with Herb Brooks. So I'm not saying these players have, it's a whole different game now. I'm not saying they've come in overweight, literally overweight. I think maybe their mindset is that, hey, listen, the game's easy now. We've done it. All we have to do is just step on the ice. Well, to win in the National Hockey League, you can't just step on the ice. You've got to do all the little things right, which they were doing last year in the playoffs. So I think they'll be fine. I think they got a talented team, but they need to just remember, okay, how do you win in the National Hockey League? And it's not by taking shortcuts like they're doing right now.
Yeah, great. Good stuff, Tom. As always, appreciate having you on and for your offering your insight. And for those of you who don't know, Tom and I do our own podcast every Monday and Wednesday in the mornings. And tell them where to find it.
We've got on radio.co, you can go to 365 Sports and hear the radio version of it. And Bob, one thing I got to mention too, listen, I think you need to be put into sainthood here, dealing with Kevin all the time. Like maybe you and I could do our own show. Talk about Kevin behind the back or something.
We could tell stories about Kevin. What was that guy who had the website telling the stuff about his dad? We could have a podcast just telling Kevin stories.
Yes, that's right. We'll talk about behind the back.
That's awesome. All right. Thanks again, Tom.
Okay. See you guys.
That was Tom Laidlaw, the former NHL player, and now involved in what he calls the true grit lifestyle. He gets up every morning at 3:30 and he works out. He doesn't put anything but healthy foods in his body. Takes 2 marches, as he calls them, in the morning. He does more before, he's like the Army, before 9 a.m. than while the rest of us are still rolling out of the sack. But he knows his hockey, and I pretty much like what he had to say about all that. It's not like we don't understand what John Tortorella is about. And if nothing else, he's honest. You're not left guessing, if you're a player, about how he feels about anything. It's pretty clear.
I know when I played the game, and obviously I didn't play it at that level, but if I had a coach like that, and over the years I did have a few like that, as long as they were fair, I didn't care how hard or how tough they were, because I knew I was going to show up and do everything I could to win that day and do what I was asked to do. And I was, if I got yelled at, it was because I deserved to be yelled at. And I never had a problem playing for those guys. But I did have one coach that did it. Tom talked about it. He played mind games with people. It was a pee-wee baseball team, basically. I went to 12-year-olds, and he would, if you made an error, he would scream at you. Well, you're 12 years old. You're gonna make errors because you're 12. You haven't played the game that long, and he just was a tyrant. And by the end of the season, every kid was terrified to go near the baseball because they knew if they got to make an error, he was going to scream at them.
Yeah, no, that's positive reinforcement, even at the pro level. I'm always amazed. We talk about, this is players that are, earning their livelihood through playing a game. But it is their profession. And you would think that, because they've mastered their craft, that, they would be a very confident bunch. But much like the 12 and 14 and 16 and 18-year-old athletes that we see, pro athletes, it's all about confidence. And there's ebbs and flows in their confidence. And I think that's where a coach can really help from the mental side of the game. Like the coaches, I think, who can sort of identify where athletes are on the confidence cycle and have, tricks in their bag or words of wisdom that they can help players sort of regain their confidence, because that's half the battle in this game. You got to just stay confident. It's not easy to do, because every day you're out there trying to do your best. There are players out there doing their best to prevent you from doing your best, and they're really good at it. And because of that, so we don't see as many Tortorella style coaches as we now see. I would say the modern coaches who are tough in their own way, but are good communicators. Have I don't know. I don't know if amicable is the right word, but their relationship with their players, may not be as hostile as we've seen from in the past with some coaches. There are great old stories about players throwing skates at Mike Keenan and challenging him to a fight, and we've all heard players be just livid over coaches, and I think we have less of that now. Thankfully. And, I think the modern style works just as well. But saying all that, I'm a believer that John Tortorella gets a lot out of his players. I know a lot of players like playing for him. He just wants them to be better. And he pushes them, sure, to to their limits, but a lot of them feel they come out as better players.
Yeah, and I think that's all a player can really ask for from their coaches. Just be honest with me, whether you're tough or whether you're, whether they call a player's coach or that. Just be honest with the player about, their performance, their effort, what you expect from them. Just don't, like Tom said, don't play the mind games. Like Scotty Bowman, I remember telling me shortly after he started in Detroit, and he admitted, he didn't always have this approach when he was a younger coach, but he said you have to learn that even though there's a team, there's 20 individuals on that team, and the way he put it exactly was, what makes one guy tick is going to tick another guy off. So you can't push the same button with every player. You got to learn what makes each guy go.
Yeah, no, that's and that's pretty good insight from a guy who's known as the greatest coach of all time at the NHL level. It's hard to argue with his statistical accomplishments. Bob, I wanted to shift gears before we run out of time. I want to talk about a few teams around the league and how they're going. And the first one I want to talk about is the Pittsburgh Penguins, who, a lot of folks were projecting they were going to miss the playoffs this year. That Crosby and Malkin were getting a little long in the tooth. That defense still seemed a little shaky. We have Tristan Jarry as the chosen one now in goal. They got rid of the safety net and Matt Murray, trading him to Ottawa. But here we are, 6 games in, and the Penguins, I think, have won 4 in a row, and they're 4-2, and they're not a perfect team. Their defense does look shaky, but they are at the spot where we expect the Penguins to be.
Yeah, but I think you got to look below the surface of this 4-game winning streak they're on. A, they all came at home, for one thing. B, they trailed in every game. In fact, in 2 of the games, they didn't take the lead till they scored a shootout winner and an overtime winner. So, as to bring his name up again, Mike Babcock used to say, catch-up hockey is losing hockey, because eventually it's going to catch up to you. That you can't keep battling from behind. And 4 straight games, they've done that. Now they go into Boston tonight and then play in Boston again on Thursday, and that'll be a bit more of a test for them to see. They haven't won a game in Boston in 7 years, so this will be a real test of where the Penguins are at, how they perform in Boston. And then the other thing you got to wonder about them is what's going on with Evgeny Malkin. 1 power play goal and 1 secondary assist through 6 games. I mean, this is a guy who won the Hart and Art Ross trophies. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, I gotta say he looks disengaged. When you watch him play, he's not the Malkin that we've seen. I know a veteran writer, Josh Yohe, said of The Athletic, said that the last game he watched him play, he had never seen Malkin not be involved the way he wasn't involved in that game. So I think I agree with you that there are some concerns there. I do like the fact when you look at it on paper, I've always said the Penguins have never had enough wingers to go with Crosby and Malkin. It always seemed like they were one short. They'd have 3 good wingers and then a guy that just would fill in for a lot of years. But now I like Rust is a good player. Good speed, scores. What did he get? 20-some last year. I think Kapanen can play in the top 6. We've got him we can put in. Zucker's off to a terrible start, but he's a quality winger that can play with that group in Gunsel. So you do have 4 wingers, 4 of those 2 centers who I think are, premium wingers, guys that can produce at an elite level. But, that defense, especially, Marino, they've really learned to appreciate him. Last season, he kind of shocked some people with how well he played. And this year he's off to a terrible start. And they don't have, Letang is not playing at the level he did when he was younger as well. So I think that defense is suspect. And, Jarry started out poorly, has played okay in his last couple of games. But I think his save percentage is still down below 900. And I think if you're going to make the playoffs in that division, your goaltending's got to be in that 915 to 920 range.
Yeah, this is not the season where you can let your goalie kind of play himself out of a slump. He's got to deliver the goods, or you got to go to the other guy.
Yeah, no, that's right. And did you agree with Tom's assessment of what's going on in Vancouver? Just a young team that, didn't know what they didn't know, and now they're figuring it out and they're struggling a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's an element to that. I mean, sometimes the worst thing that can happen for a young player is to have instant success, because then as he said, they think it's easy. I don't know how many players I've talked to who got to the Stanley Cup final in like their first or second season. I remember Chris Chelios was telling me in Montreal in '86 when they won, he just kind of took it for granted. He said he didn't even take a spin with the cup. He didn't really, look at the cup after it was gone, and then he waited 16 years to win it again. So he said, you when you're younger, you just don't appreciate. And he said that he should have listened to the veteran guys. Guys like Larry Robinson, who'd won countless cups, were still treating it like it was, their firstborn child when they got it again. And he said, being a smug, know-it-all kid, he didn't take that approach, and he regretted it.
Yeah, no, there's, sometimes success is wasted on the youth. They don't really have a understanding of the meaning of it all until, it's well in their rear view mirror. So anyway, looks like we've run out of time, Bob.
We always do. There's always more hockey talk than there is time. And we'll be back to talk more hockey on Thursday. He's Kevin, I'm Bob, and this has been the Hockey Debates Podcast. We'll see you on Thursday.